Welcome to Zen Money Monday, weekly conversations with innovators, thought leaders, and entrepreneurial junkies about building good businesses, exploring what the idea of Zen money really means, and how to achieve it. With your host, author, business strategist, and Zen Money CFO, Liz LaJoy.
So, Josh, I'm so excited that you can be here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Liz.
So Josh and I connected officially face-to-face not that long ago, but I've been using his product, which is Interact, which is an online quiz platform, for a while. And I wanted him to come on the show so we could talk a little bit more about how he built his business and to continue a conversation that we had on his podcast, which was around service versus sales. So
yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
If you have built a really significant business. When did you start Interact? I know you started right out of college, right? Or in college? What's the origin story here?
Yeah. It was in college that Matt and I started it. So let's see, we were 19 and now we are almost 28. So wow, I'm really
almost
bad
a
at math.
Decade under your belt.
That's a long time. Yeah, basically like a third of our lives. Which is kind of nuts. And before that, I had kind of started my own companies, just like little ones. So started that when I was 15. So almost half my life I've been running my own company, never had a full-time job. Closest thing was an internship. So yeah, Interact started just as the result of Matt and I working together. Matt's one of my best friends and my co-founder. And we met in school. We started working on projects together. We both kind of had a knack for it. And then this just kind of fell into place. It's like that luck comes to the people that work the hardest quote, where we were working on stuff. We were building websites. This was back when there was no website builders. There was no lead magnet tools. It
was all coding and that was it.
All coding. Yeah. It was like Upwork, which was called something else back then. And you would like pick up these jobs and you'd build just the weirdest websites
to make some extra money on the side.
Yeah. And that's what we did. We kind of just like scrapped by. And then the quiz thing came up. A friend suggested that we turn it into a platform. We had no idea how to do that. We figured it out. Well, Matt figured it out while he was in Hawaii on vacation. He came back. We launched it.
Like all good ideas.
Exactly, right? We launched it. Yeah, I mean, long story short, it was a really slow start. Took like a year to get anyone to pay. Took 5 years to get back to making a market rate salary. And then 7 years for real growth to start happening. And then the last 2 years, it's a full on kind of super fast growing startup.
Although, are you actually a startup? Yes. I mean, I think you've hit that level, right? We're in multiple seven figures now, and it's kind of in the whoa, this has legs. It's going somewhere. That's exciting. What did you do to support yourself in the meantime when in those years 0 through 5? Was this just you're working on it at midnight in the middle, after a job kind of thing?
Nope. Just did not make very much money. It was rough. Would not recommend, but maybe I would. I don't know. It depends on your knack for scraping by. What did I do? Well, there's kind of a rundown. I mean, I didn't make much money, to put it in really practical terms, living in the Bay Area, probably the most expensive place in the world, other than Switzerland, which is absurd, but very expensive, and was making $30,000 a year. So I lived in what was technically a walk-in closet, but it passes as a room. The bed barely fit. You kind of had to jump on it from the end. For 2.5, 3 years did that. Yeah, and just really scraped by, racked up some debts, just kind of made it work. We did a lot of we were working on it full time the whole time because there was so much that needed to go into the platform that needed to get built, but the demand wasn't there. And so it's like being ahead of the wave, which I've only surfed once, but this actually makes a ton of sense. Like if you go out in front of the wave, it doesn't push you. You just like lay there and it
Mm.
never like goes. And you have to keep like paddling and paddling and paddling. And then the wave eventually catches up and pushes you. So you're doing all this work, but you're barely moving. And that's what it was like. And so, yeah, it was full time and really just working all the time, making basically nothing, just in the hopes that eventually the wave would catch up. And yeah, just cutting everything that we could to make it just stay alive.
Hmm. To be viable without, there's nothing there for bells and whistles, I'm assuming, based on that story.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. I think I went on vacation like once every 2 years, and it was very stressful because I would be like moving money from like a personal account to cover like bills, and then like it was just always like last second scraping by at the end of every month to make all the payments, and that was really terrible.
What was your relationship to money coming into the building a business?
Yeah, I grew up very, very poor. There was, let's see, I have 6 siblings. So there's 7 kids and 2 parents. There's 9 people in a 3-bedroom house. And we were on food stamps for a while. Um, it was a lot of like rice and beans. I didn't know what like oysters were. And so that was a funny revelation in college. I was like, you eat those? That's gross.
Why would you do
Um,
that?
yeah, like what is wrong with you? Now I think they're really good. We're getting some tomorrow. But yeah, very, very poor. Money was always an issue, and there was never any plans around it.
Mm.
So it was just like when it was there, you spent it, and then it was basically never there. So it was definitely a point of stress. And that's a big part of what led me to branching out on my own, because when I was 15, I was basically left to fend for myself financially. And that was also 2008. So a really deep recession. And I grew up in the Central Valley of California, which is kind of like the Dust Bowl in a lot of ways. So it was really hard hit. And the only way I could make money was to go out on my own and just start literally going door to door, hawking services for like landscaping and yard maintenance and stuff. And that was my first foray into starting my own company.
Got it. And you were doing that up through being able to attend college and get into that next piece of the puzzle.
Well, that accelerated really quickly. So I had like one high and then a really far downfall. So
Oh, no.
um, went from door to door hawking yard services, and then I got into buying and selling electronics like laptops, and I taught myself how to fix them. And it was super lucrative. So from 15 to 18, basically went from the door-to-door thing and being completely broke to when I was 17 and a half, I bought a Mercedes in cash with the money that I had made buying and selling laptops. It did really well. And drove to my high school graduation.
Nice.
But then it all came crashing down because I started to flunk out of college,
Yeah.
because I couldn't do both. And so basically I had a pretty heavy downfall dropping from that. And then I started driving. Well, I got rid of that car and to like pay bills. I bought like a 1988 Toyota Celica that literally broke down on La Brea which there's like songs about this happening. I had to push it, and then I could only drive it at night because it would overheat. And then I like sold it to a junkyard for $300. And that was in the span of like 6 months, went from like living large to being fully put in my place again. So
Wow, that is an incredible story. And that's all just leading up to you founding what now is a very successful company.
yeah, there was a lot of learnings along the way. And I think the takeaway from that was like, even if things are going well, it doesn't mean that you can just do whatever you want. Like discipline and good habits are not, you don't stop having those just because you have some means, right? Like, there's stories about like storing up in a prudent like way. And I think that was my big learning, because I had no understanding of like what that meant growing up. And then all of a sudden I had all this money and then I lost it all. And then, luckily got a second chance. And so now the approach is very different.
And I imagine that it was hard in the first few years to really balance that new learning with the realities of new business growth, where you're like, I would love to be saving for a rainy day, but I'm living in a closet and I'm scraping by to make sure the bills are paid at the end of the month.
Yeah, it was interesting. And I think like I've heard other people talk about this, which is it's easier in a way to live like that when you did come from nothing, because the family income or expenditure, like disposable income growing up for 9 people was probably like $20,000. Like that's about as low as you can go. And so even in those times where it was like really bad, I was like, well, I know this is survivable, and I have this vision of what I want things to head towards. So as long as that's in place, like I'm willing to continue doing this and see where it can go. And I think that was beneficial in a way, because it allowed me to be like, okay, well, this is fine. Like I've experienced this before. Obviously, it's not great mentally or physically, but it's survivable. And that's one aspect of it. But then the other aspect is, yeah, then once you move on and you start to grow, and you have to become more diversified and smart. And that's where I've really started to surround myself with people that have done that and know what they're doing and have experience I can learn from. And that's made all the difference in terms of me learning what it's like to, kind of have that balance of, having means, but then also maintaining good habits and good discipline, what that really looks like, and how to not swing too far one way or the other. And so it's really been learning from the people that have been there and done that.
How did you guys start getting clientele? Was it all in the nascent online stage? Were you going to like shows? How did you start to, once you finally hit that stage where, the waves started to pick up, how were you finding people?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I just read something this morning about Seth Godin, the kind of, well-known marketer guy.
Mm-hmm.
He goes on any podcast that has recorded 100 episodes, and he's basically like, if you've done 100 episodes, even if it doesn't have a big audience, like that means you're persevering, and that's the key to success. And that's exactly what happened to us. It was the 103rd blog post that I wrote that finally got somebody to come and sign up for our product. So the first year that our site was live and people could use it, no one used it. And I would just write blog posts, and I wrote 103 in a year. So a couple every week, and really learned a lot during that time about content marketing in general. And so the 103rd blog post was the one that got somebody to come and sign up and put their credit card down and pay for Interact, which happened to coincide with a month before Matt and I graduated from college, which was good timing because I think if no one had signed up, it would have been really hard to justify like actually doing this because there would have been no income coming in. And it's hard to take that when we graduated from UCLA. So, and we graduated in a good time where people were getting offers at Amazon and Google and LinkedIn and these programs where they were treated really, really well and paid a lot. So we were trading that. And so fortunately, we got that to kind of click.
Did you have a conscientious conversation with each other around, we know that we're passing up job opportunities here?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. So we have a third co-founder as well. He moved on early because he was a designer, and we just did when those hard times, it literally just made no sense. So that was tough, but we're all still really close friends. But the three of us this is how it happened. We were having pizza in Pasadena because we used to go to Pasadena to work out of an apartment for just like days at a time when we were building this. And we're sitting there and I was like, okay, so we're probably graduating soon. You guys want to just do this? And then they're like, yeah. And that was it. So that's how we decided.
This is the version of entrepreneurship from the 20-year-old perspective. Yeah, yes. What the hell? Let's give it a go.
Yeah. And sometimes we look back on that conversation like, did we really decide not to get jobs in like 12 seconds over pizza? That's how it happened.
Sometimes that's all you need. I love it. That's a great story. That's awesome. So one thing that we have been talking about was around really prioritizing service. And I think we don't often think about a service-based business when we're talking about like a point and click kind of platform that you can get without actually interacting with somebody. How did that all come into play for you guys?
Yeah, I think in all my experiences really working on anything, I think the differentiating factor is the ability to connect with the person that you are helping or selling to. And if you understand what it is they're looking for and what they need, and you can help with that, then you don't have to sell on like the features being slightly better or the advantages of things. And I think we chatted about this before, but I am terrible at selling. I can't do it. I cannot bring myself to sell things because, and this is kind of learnings from the past too, because in the past I've been not the best person when it comes to selling things, but in the current revised version of myself, I'm just not able to. I literally can't do it. But what I can do really well is understand like where are you coming from and what it is that you need, and then offer up something that's helpful. And for me personally, it's easiest in written format or talking things through, but all of our marketing is not actually marketing. It's just education. So we'll do workshops, we'll do webinars, we'll do written stuff, we'll do video stuff, we'll do walkthroughs, we'll build the product, we'll bring engineers into it. So it's literally just about matching up. What are you trying to do? And do I have something that helps? Those two things match, then you just try to connect the dots as much as possible, which is extremely difficult in a product-based business because you think about the personalization that goes into being a service-based business where you're talking to somebody a lot and that's how you're helping them. And now you try to turn that into a product. It's crazy the amount that goes into it. Like the spreadsheets, not spreadsheets, but like the flow charts of like how to design that is just nuts. And then there's also the personal element of it. So bringing in stories. And so we now bring in like lots of people that actually build quizzes for other people. And that makes up the team that creates that product interface experience. So we're melding the two things. But yeah, it's really just about, what do you really need, and how can I help, or can I help? And if so, how do we match those things up?
Yeah, I really love that. I think, I live far more in the service side of the entrepreneurial small business space. And there's this interesting trend, I think, online in particular, where a lot of people have tried to sort of productize their services. And what we're talking about is actually the other way around, that you, as a successful product business owner, are attempting to actually service orient the product conversation and the product's experience.
Yeah, and it's I think it just needs to land somewhere in the middle, because the vast majority of our customers are making that transition more and more from service to product, because they're coaches, they're teachers, they're doing these things that don't scale, and they're trying to turn them into something that does scale. The method and the picture kind of that I visualize as I'm thinking about this in my head is basically, can you imagine what one person with one particular need is going to require in order to be successful with whatever it is you're offering? So, you know, I've gone through quite a few different financial kind of things for myself. So if I'm thinking about, okay, so where I was at, getting a real income for the first time, I want to think about, what are my steps towards success? What were the pieces that went into that? What were the very small chunks? What were the very small steps that helped me get from no idea what I'm doing to being fully set up and on a path to financial freedom? Then you have to break that down. And that's one very specific use case, right? So somebody else who's coming in and they have a bunch of debt and high income, but just everything's a mess, they have a totally different path. And then somebody else who's making less than they spend, that's another different, like, there's just all these different paths. And so the key from my perspective, no matter which way you're going, is to understand as many paths as possible. And if you have a product and you already have a bunch of users, you have to understand which paths have the most use, because you have to start with those. But then you break it down as like, okay, here's this use. So for us, it's like coffee quizzes are really big, and I love taking them because I really enjoy my coffee, and it's very fun.
Can I just break in for a second there, because you'd mentioned that before. So what is it about, like, coffee quizzes are fun? So multiple people who may or may not be in the coffee industry are putting out coffee quizzes just because it's entertaining? Is that what's happening?
No. So like coffee shops, or people that
Okay.
sell coffee beans, which is especially relevant online right now,
Hmm.
they do these quizzes of which coffee matches your like
Right.
personality, your interests. And
Mm-hmm.
it's super fun because like you can try coffee from all these different shops, and you're going to get something that matches up to your taste profile, which
Fascinating.
literally, for me personally, the issue that I have with trying out new places is this, like, well, what if I buy something and it's just totally wrong? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just like gross. Like, I like light roast. What if they give me a dark roast? Like, it's not great.
I've spent
And
16
so,
bucks on a bag of beans I'm never going to use, and it's going to take up space in my freezer. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
exactly. So then these quizzes are perfect. But that's one very specific use case. And somebody who's coming in to make a coffee quiz has a very different perspective than an online coach for personal trainers.
Right.
Like, that's vastly different. And both of those are actually big, verticals that we have to try to serve. So we really have to understand, what are the needs of each of those people, and can we set up a system that feels like it's designed for them to make a coffee quiz, but it's also designed for the other person to make a fitness personality type quiz, and
Mm-hmm.
walks them through each step of that process, and breaking that down into just bite-sized pieces and then building it back up into something that can scale up to hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands or eventually millions of people who are building these quizzes. That's really the work that has to go into it.
I think it's so interesting with a platform like yours, in terms of how many different kinds of applications there can be. I mean, there's you have a nice set of sort of canned, here's how you can start thinking about what you might want to be, how to engage with, people. It's a nice way to market and talk to, potential client base. But you guys must have, you must have so many different kinds of businesses coming and talking to you, whether they're virtually talking to you or not, about utilizing this platform because it's so dynamic.
Yeah, it's crazy. And one of the things that we made, a strategic error on, or we were actually just trying to figure it out at first because it was not clear in the initial stages who was going to be successful with it. So we tried to help everybody. And oh my gosh, the amount of time that I would spend helping clients set up quizzes, absolutely bonkers. Like, we're talking hundreds of hours to help one company set up one quiz in the earlier days, and then they're paying us $49 a month. Like,
right. And they may or may not be getting the result that you want, which probably has little to do with what you're helping them with, and more about what they expect.
Did not. Most of the time they did not, and then they canceled. So they pay us like $150, and I worked for them for like 200 hours.
Oh my God.
Not efficient, but it's all part of the process of figuring out who is going to have success with it, because you also help out somebody who, you do that and then all of a sudden it quadruples their business. Like, actually, like a wellness coach, which is now one of our bigger verticals, early on I helped her set her stuff up. It like quadrupled the size of her business. She got a book deal. She like had this, best-selling podcast is definitely wrong. Most listened to podcast in the space, and all that was on the back of her quiz. And so that was an example where I helped somebody and it really worked. And you have no way of figuring that out unless you just try it. But then based on that, and then now we have numbers to back it up of which use cases actually work really well, because the problem with everything working is that you can't serve everyone well. And so you really have to choose, and you really have to focus heavily on a few. So we focus heavily on a few. And then eventually, as things scale, we can basically recreate like teams based on verticals that can serve each market as they continue to grow. But you really have to stay super focused.
Because in the recording of this, we're, many weeks into COVID-19 and people are moving into the online space more. Have you seen a shift for you guys when you crystal ball out? How are you guys preparing for the future?
I think that this is going to accelerate things, and the trend that I've been banking on for a decade and still waiting on actually happening is that the internet's going to become a recreation of what happens in person. So think about what happens in person with physical storefronts. And you think about the best experiences of this right now, like Sephora probably has one of the best, if not the best, retail experiences ever. And it's also not ironic that their entire website is made out of quizzes now. But the thing that they do in person is you're browsing, eye creams, and this person comes up to you and asks you about what you need or what your problems are, what you're trying to fix. And then they recommend 2 or 3 products at different price points. That is literally a quiz. And then they made that quiz on their website. So their website emulates the in-person experience, and both are very strong. That is exactly what I'm banking on happening. And I think this is going to accelerate it probably by 2 to 5 years. Initially, we were kind of projecting that it would be another 7 or so years until this was really mainstream, where like the idea of having your website become the same experience that you have in store in terms
Mm.
of somebody, i.e. the quiz, asking you questions and then helping you find the right products or services. That was probably, quite a ways out. And I think it's accelerated up, which is exciting. And I think is a good thing overall because it helps brands just become more personal, it helps them connect better with their customers and actually provide products and services that are useful instead of having to guess and check.
Hmm. And that when we as the customer come in feel like, well, this was built for somebody, but it's not for me. And there's more hurdles to get over before you get comfortable with them. Mm-hmm.
Right, right.
What has been one of the biggest challenges for you as you guys have been like on the back end in the business building part, business financial management, whatever it might be, as you guys have grown? What has been the biggest like, oh, didn't see that one coming. That was a big learning experience.
I think that, and I've reflected this to Matt before, like there's so much stuff out there about how to get your first 100 clients or how to incorporate or how to set up a website. There's nothing that tells you how to deal with city, county, state, and federal, and also international governments once you reach a certain scale to where they all care about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no guide on that, and no one would read it if there was. But I was reading this book by Rand Fishkin, the founder of Moz, which is like a pretty large SaaS company. And he's like, what no one tells you about running a business is you spend 30% of your time on the phone with governments. And it's not that bad for us.
Might
And
be a little high, right, for certain people. But
yeah. And like, thankfully, I have a great team that can handle a lot of that. But it's that kind of stuff where it's like, oh, wow. Like now you have to deal with a database of like billions of data points coming in, like literally billions. And parsing through that takes like 6 months to build a platform that can help you understand that data. And there's no tool that's going to do that for you because like there's just not, and there's just so many things that are specific that come up. I think it's really overcoming those challenges and then also going through that transition from like just trying to serve everybody, help everybody, and now all of a sudden you've got to be really focused, and there's always this temptation to take the focus off. But
mm-hmm.
I've seen so many companies go down because they take the focus off and they try to do everything and they try to achieve everything and they try to build everything. They try to make everything perfect, and then it all just crashes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Maybe that's the takeaway. I was going to ask you if you were going to give a piece of advice to our listeners, what would it be, having built this successful business?
I think there's really just one, but it kind of turns into two. So the one is just listening and having good conversations with the people that you're trying to serve. And then the second half of that becomes focus. So once you really understand what they're trying to serve, then you have to start saying no to everybody else because they'll ask and they'll ask and they'll ask. And one of the things that we used to do when we felt like we had no choice was to say yes. And, it was just very time consuming and never made sense. And I don't know if we would have gone faster if we had stayed more focused. Hard to say because the market has to develop. But I think that's really the biggest thing that you can do. And then the last thing that is kind of the umbrella of all that is just have patience, because there's definitely a perception that if you go really hard, like there's these ideas. I'm listening to who's the author that wrote Big Little Lies? I'm listening to her other book.
Yes, I know. I can like see the name, but I can't.
Yeah, but it's literally a book about like a 10-day detox program, and we just live in a world that believes everything can be done in a 10-day detox program.
Hmm.
And the reality is that anything good takes a year to get started and will take a minimum of 5 years to become something. And I think that you really have to understand like how to wake up and have still fire to keep going, to be excited about what you're doing, but not setting for yourself an expectation that it's going to become something in the short run because you'll just burn out.
Yeah. Or it just won't be feasible. You'll overextend yourself financially. There's all kinds of ways to burn out. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think in the online space, especially, like there is so much noise around go big, go hard, make a gajillion dollars in 16 months. And it's just, it's not long-term sustainable for anybody. It's exhausting.
Yeah. And it's not real life. Like all the founders that I know, it's like, even if technically the company started in a certain year, they were working on the skills that went into that company for 10 years before that. And then the company started in a certain year, and then it took 10 years. So now you're at 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the truth of most companies that do well. It's like you're probably working on the things that went into it being successful for a long time before you started it. Then once you started it, it took a long time to get going. And then once it's going, that's where people start to notice. They're like, oh, wow, that just popped up. But it's like, okay, that was 6 years of running this company and then 7 years of prep before that. So you want to
And a
get
lot of
here.
mistakes along the way and all kinds of stuff.
Right, right. But that doesn't mean it's discouraging because those 13 years weren't wasted. They weren't even any less valuable than where you're at now. You were learning a ton and it's transferable to a lot of places. So,
Ah, I so appreciate that because I do think there's, whether it's internal or external messaging, there's a lot of, the big question around, do I jump ship? How long do we keep doing this? All of that kind of stuff, as if it's an either or situation. And it's really just an ongoing process, I think, more than anything. And it doesn't mean that
yeah,
if you get to a point where it's not feeling good, that it's been a wasted experience.
right. And I think it really changes how you view it too. And obviously, you have to be conscious of how it's affecting you financially and physically and mentally and all those types of things. And, in terms of family and friends and that kind of stuff. And there's also this crazy emphasis on like going all in and like dropping everything and, going super hard. But the reality is that if you focus well, you can do just as much in like 4 or 5 hours a day as a lot of people that are working 14 hours a day, which I can speak to from personal experience because that's what I used to do, thinking that the longer you worked, the more you got done. But all the research shows that you really can only focus for like 4 hours a day. So you're not really doing anything the rest of that time. And you'll actually get a lot more done if you spend the rest of that time doing things that you enjoy and connecting with people.
Yeah. Decompressing and all of those good things. Awesome.
Mhm.
All right. I'm very appreciative of your time today. I always ask everybody this question before we sign off, which is, from your perspective, what does Zen money mean to you?
To me, it means not having to worry about your money, not having to worry about how you're going to pay for things or whether you can afford something because and you have it all figured out in terms of what your budgets are and what your income is. And it's easy for you to make choices of I can afford that and I can't afford that. And you're not getting yourself in over your head and you're not stressed about it.
Ooh, I like it. It's very good and succinct. Thank you so much for your time today, Josh. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.